Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to this afternoon's Planning and Environmental Protection Committee. My name's Councillor Chris Harper and I'm chairing this meeting today. I'm also joined by a selection of councillors who join me on this committee to make decisions and debate with me, and also council officers from different departments and my legal team and administration to the left. A few housekeeping rules then before I begin. If you need to use the facilities, they're back out through the door in the main area, and if there's a fire alarm, please leave the building and make your way to the Cathedral Concourse where we will meet up to do a roll call. Any members of the public that are due to speak today, please can you make sure you wipe down the microphone and the actual touch button between speakers while we keep the COVID at bay and keep things sterile. Also, if you've got any phones, etc., could you please make sure they are on silent at this point. So we'll go straight to item 1. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We do have apologies from Councillor Jamil, Andrew Bond and Christian Hogg, and we have Councillor Noreen B in a substitute, Councillor Sanford and Councillor Sandra Bond as substitute today.
Thank you very much, and councillors that are subbing today, thank you very much for your time for coming in. Item 2 then is declarations of interest. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's in relation to item 5.1 at Hampton. It is on the public record that I'm on the parish council. But I'm aware it was discussed at the parish council last Thursday, but I didn't attend the meeting because of obviously this upcoming planning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to ask anything else on that? Are you happy with that?
Happy, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Thank you. Item 3 then is declaration to make representation as a ward councillor. And none of those. Item 4 then relates to the minutes of the previous meetings. We're being asked to approve minutes from the meeting held on the 22nd of March and the 12th of April 2022. Can I ask for a proposer and seconder for the first one? Councillor Hiller, proposing? Yes, seconder, Councillor Jones. And the other one, the 12th of April proposer? Thank you, seconder, Councillor Hussain this time. Okay, are we all agreed they are a correct record, both of them? Yep, excellent, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5. Item 5.1 is tranche TC5 Eagle Way, Silver Hill Hampton Centre in Peterborough, and I would ask please Officer Mike Osborne please to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. It's the presentation. There you go. Thank you. So this application is a full application for a single T-shaped building up to 4 stories in height to provide 80 1- and 2-bedroom assisted living units on land known as tranche TC5 in Hampton. The proposal includes communal facilities including dining and wellbeing facilities, areas of public and private landscaping, and a 45 car parking space car park to the front of the site served by an in and out access arrangement. Have the next slide please, Karen. Thank you. This slide is just showing you the broad location of the site. You can see it's located just to the south-ish of Serpentine Green. Next slide please, Karen. This one just gives you another sort of a sense of the context of the site, the scale of the development around the site. What you've got to the west and the south is predominantly housing, and then obviously you've got Serpentine Green and the retail facilities that offers to the north, and the area just immediately to the south east of the site is more of a sort of local centre where you've got church and other facilities and bits and pieces like that. Next slide please, thank you. So the application's been referred to committee in the main because of the allocation for the site. The application site, partly straddles the local centre allocation for this for this part of Hampton. The blue shaded area on the plan above shows you the allocation for the local centre itself. The site is broadly split in half between land that's inside the local centre and outside of the local centre. And given the nature of the allocation, it was felt that was a reason to bring it forward as a form of a departure from the local plan. Although, as I've explained in the case officer report, why we are sort of broadly comfortable with this particular type of use occurring and being compatible with the local centre use in itself. The next slide, please, Karen. Thank you. This just gives you a bit more of a flavour of the context for the site itself. It's a broadly flat site, although there is a levels change that falls across it from the north-west to the south-east. And this plan also shows you some of the sort of adjoining adjacencies in terms of things like the existing residential development, particularly Tabor Court to the northwest. The prevailing house types are a mixture of 2.5 storey properties, some of them stretching up to 3 storeys in height, and that's sort of relevant when we get on to looking at the scale of the proposal shortly.
Yeah, sorry.
Before we go on, is that red line true? Right, because we've got a different red line on there. Shouldn't that come parallel with the footpath?
That red line is taken. Admittedly, this particular image is taken from the design and access statement, so it's not necessarily the red line as it's drawn on the plan, but it is effectively. If you could zoom in on that, you would see that it straddles the footpath that runs between Serpentine Green and the local centre. So it's effectively it's correct, although I wouldn't rely on that as a plotted red line boundary, if that makes sense. Next slide, please, Karen. Thank you. This probably doesn't come out quite as well as I'd hoped it does, to be honest, in terms of the number of photographs on the slide, but you've had a visit to the site. This was just to give you a flavour of the context of the site in terms of the prevailing character of the development surrounding the site, the use of materials, the scale and context in that sense, and also some images of the site itself. At the moment it's scrubland. That has always been envisaged will come forward as part of Hampton in due course. Next slide, please, Karen. So this is the first representation of the actual sort of development layout, if you like. I've used this one because it gives you a flavour of both the building footprints, the locations for the car park that you can see to the south of the building itself, with the in and out access arrangement, the incorporation of landscaping around the site, and the sort of broad general arrangement and the sort of footprint proximity to the neighbouring properties. We have the next slide, please, Karen. And then this is just building up an understanding of what the floor plate looks like. So this is the ground floor. What you've got in the central areas and the yellow areas are the broadly communal facilities, so the dining, the wellbeing facilities, buggy store, cycle facilities and that sort of thing. The blue areas are then the areas of residential accommodation within the scheme, so the apartments. And then what you get going up the building, next slide please, Karen, is a very similar footprint as you rise up the building in terms of the accommodation arrangement. The upper floors are largely given over to residential accommodation in the 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. As you rise up the building, the height reduces on the adjacent in the areas that are adjacent to the existing residential development, and that's partly a device to sort of ameliorate the relationship between the existing residential development and the proposal. Next slide, please, Karen. And then what you see on this slide is the representation of what the street view looks like, which is from Silver Hill, which is the image at the bottom. So you see where we have the white units on the left-hand side of that image that are 2 and 2.5 stories. The proposal is of a similar 2.5 story style, albeit height and massing, but the actual materiality and the form of the building changes. And then as you move away from the existing residential, the proposal rises up to 3.5 and then 4 stories, and the element that runs parallel with the footpath that takes you into Serpentine Green. Then the image at the top is what you would see from the footpath that takes you into Serpentine Green, so you can see the sort of height and the fenestration there, and what the scheme includes there are elements of balconies and active frontage onto that space as well. Next slide please, Karen. and this is slightly less colourful, admittedly, but it's the sections of the site looking back at the site from other vantage points, albeit these are less obvious visual areas in that some of them front onto or back onto the service areas for Serpentine Green itself, and also then share a common boundary with the existing residential development at Tabor Court, the other side of the fence line there to the northwest. Next slide, please, Karen. This is just another representation of the development itself in terms of a sort of 3D representation. And this is, I've put this slide in the pack just to give you a sense of how the scale and of the development relates to the surrounding area. Next slide, please, Karen. And I believe this was something that was looked at on the site, so I thought it was useful particularly to include this in the pack. This is an image from the application that includes the car parking arrangement and the access arrangements, and part of the proposal includes the removal of 2 existing parking bays within Silver Hill and the re-provision of those on the other side of Silver Hill, the retention of existing landscape, and this also shows how the access would be achieved in terms of visibility in and out of the site. And this is just for the members that were able to join the site visit. This is what you'll have seen. An image. This image just sort of shows you what is occurring here. The parking bays on the left of that image there are being removed and replaced like for like on the opposing side of Silver Hill, and this is the same on the other side in terms of the in part of the access, if you like. And this is just a final image that gives you. Sorry, Karen, I've skipped on, haven't I? Keep forgetting to give you a prompt. I'm sorry about that. Yep. Sorry, thank you. So I'm looking at my screen rather than that one. The final image in the pack is just an example of the materiality of the scheme, the sort of indicative palette of materials that the applicants have included, to give you a sense of how that would sort of relate to the existing character of the development in Hampton at this point. So the application's been recommended for approval by officers subject to section 106, and the planning conditions are set out in the report. In the update sheet there is also a note just to pick up 2 points in terms of a small area where I'd erroneously typed the wrong number of parking spaces into one part of the report, but to clarify the scheme includes 45 parking spaces and a second condition, an additional condition regarding mechanical ventilation. I think just as finally summarise some of the issues that came out of the application, I'll try to summarise those through the scheme, but the main issues that came through the consultation process related to matters of highway, safety, parking, the design of the scheme, and the scale, as well as the principle in terms of whether this coming forward interferes with the principle of the local centre use, and as it's set out in the officer's report, we feel comfortable with those, and so that's the reason for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne, for your presentation. Okay, we've got a person registered to speak on this item. Please may I ask Elizabeth Bloomfield, please, to come to one of these mics here. Oh, they're wipes over there. Welcome, you're very welcome. You'll have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee. Now, to make the mic work, you just press the button at the bottom. You probably see a picture of a face. Just press that once. When you've got about 30 seconds left, the officers will tell you you've got 30 seconds left, and at 5 minutes then you'll be told your time's finished. Is that okay? So as soon as you're ready, you may begin.
Good afternoon. I am Elizabeth Bloomfield, the planning agent for this application, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Anchor is England's largest national registered provider of affordable older persons accommodation, and they're also England's largest not-for-profit provider of accommodation and care services for older people. They're therefore extremely knowledgeable, experienced and well placed to understand the need for this type of development and how to respond to that need. Our research shows that the population aged 65 plus in the Peterborough city area is due to increase by over 46% between 2021 and 2041. By 2023, there is a predicted need for 539 additional private units of specialist housing for older people, including shared ownership, within your council's administrative area. There are currently 0 shared ownership properties specifically for older people within Peterborough. However, 53% of 65 plus aged households in Peterborough own houses within the lower house price brackets. And due to their financial position, the majority of this cohort would be ineligible for affordable rented accommodation with care, but also not be able to afford to purchase a property with care outright, as well as fund ongoing care costs. The vast majority of people in this position who are considering moving to more suitable accommodation in order to self-fund their future needs will need to release some equity from their existing property to do so. Shared ownership offers a viable route to achieve this. We've had an ongoing open dialogue with housing and adult social care officers since our original pre-application approach in February 2020 to ensure that what is proposed is agreed to be appropriate for the area. The proposal will deliver high quality, purpose-built, fully affordable assisted housing for local older people across a mix of shared ownership and affordable rent tenures. On the whole, the response to the application has been positive, with discussion around parking being the main concern. The proposal will result in the loss of 6 on-street parking spaces in the locations of the new access points, but in response to previous concerns about this, we've committed to re-providing these spaces on the opposite side of Silver Hill, and that's been captured in the planning conditions included within the committee report, as Mike mentioned. We've submitted 2 rounds of on-street parking survey data, which demonstrates ample capacity for parking within the existing on-street spaces. We've also provided evidence on comparable parking ratios for other similar developments in the area, similar existing anchor sites in similar types of locations, adjacent local authorities' parking standards, and TRICS data for this type of development, all of which demonstrate that a parking provision ratio of 0.5 spaces per unit for this type of development is appropriate. Our proposed provision equates to 0.56 spaces per unit. Following review of all the submitted information, Highways officers have accepted this position. Considering the proposal as a whole, it will provide a solution for older people who may otherwise be unable to viably access accommodation with self-funded care. It will contribute towards meeting an otherwise unmet specialist housing need. It will result in the release of currently under-occupied family-sized housing back to the market. It will deliver health benefits to residents, including combating loneliness and isolation, and the on-site care and assistance reduces the likelihood of unplanned health events, such as falls, etc., and this in turn can reduce pressure on the NHS. It will make effective use of a vacant brownfield site, which has been allocated for development, and it will generate jobs for local people across a range of skill sets. We hope you will agree with your officer's recommendation for approval of the application. If you have any questions that either myself or Charles Taylor from Anchor, who's with me, may be able to assist with, we'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Members have any questions at all? Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. There's a smaller number of parking spaces compared to the number of units. What sort of provisions or considerations being looked to be put into place to stop other people, i.e. shoppers going into Tesco's, from using that car park?
Yeah, carry out with the answer as soon as you want. Yeah.
The parking would be unallocated, as it is with all anchor sites. Generally speaking, I don't think they tend to have a problem with people who aren't using or visiting the facility parking in their car parks. But obviously what we've done is a lot of parking survey data collection in terms of the availability of spaces nearby, and there seems to be plenty available on street, which I think if people had the choice between parking in an obvious car park associated with a building or parking in the free on-street parking spaces, they'll probably choose the on-street parking spaces. And I think Serpentine Green has 2,000 car parking spaces in it as well, so, and I think they're free too, so I don't envisage it being a problem.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I'll come into you. Yeah, right. Councillor Sanford.
Yes, thank you. So it's a bit awkward to turn around. It appears that car parking is one of the major points of contention on this. So from your experience of this type of development, perhaps in this region or in other parts of the country, what proportion of the actual occupants of the housing would you think would actually have cars, and so how many of them would use public transport?
Well, the minimum age for residents is 60 years of age, but for Anchor's residents in particular, the average age is 79 years. And they certainly, I mean, obviously they've got sites all over the country, and their experience is that, generally speaking, people move to this type of accommodation partly because they're well located, so there are services and facilities in the immediate vicinity. There's mobility scooter and buggy stores provided to allow people to be able to access those without needing to drive. And there's also on-site services and facilities, so the need to drive is less. So what Anchor tend to find is, even if people move in thinking they want a car, it's really probably within 6 months that they realise they haven't used it at all. So the added stress of owning it, paying for it, is not really worth it. And they tend to, if they move in thinking they need a car, tend to lose that car within not too long of living there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hiller.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, good afternoon. A couple of things. Councillor Sanford mentioned that parking as an issue. I'm reading the report, and it appears that Peterborough Highways Service don't have any issues now with your parking provision. Is that correct?
Yes. We provided them with some additional survey information that was done exactly in line with their requirements, and that once they received that information, they've removed their objection and they've said that they're comfortable with it.
Thank you for that. My second question, Chair, with your permission, this is a sizable development, and I don't know Hampton particularly well, but it's, the Serpentine Green has been created and constructed and used for a number of decades now. But so I think locally this would appear somewhat incongruous in the site that's there currently, which is, when we saw it on Friday, is a large tract of open, almost countryside. Did you have any public consultation, any public exhibition? What liaison did you have with the local residents?
We did, yes. We held an online public consultation because it was around late 2020, early 2021, I think, when COVID basically meant that online was the best way to do it. So I've got the information here somewhere, we sent out invites in the post to a couple of hundred addresses nearby, with details of the website, and then we put up the proposed details on the website, and there was a facility for comments and queries to be raised via the online platform.
So piecemeal almost, not a sort of a blanket type approach. You didn't drop letters through everybody's letterbox that was potentially affected by this development.
The invites, the flyer was posted into, I think it was 165 nearby addresses, wards councillors, parish councillors. So that was letters that went through people's front doors, which then gave them the information to find all of the information online on the website.
So that was in fact quite comprehensive, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, you think so, and I tend to agree with you. The only, you had there were six objections from nearly 200 consultations according to the report. And I've read the objections, which I think have been countered to a great degree by the conditions. But did you have any specific liaison with the ward councillors? And if you did, what was their response? Are they supportive or what? There's no information to that degree in the report.
No, so we didn't make specific separate approaches. We deliberately sent them specifically the invites to the same information as all the public, the local residents received, and we didn't have any specific responses.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Highway, it was an issue, and you've provided them the parking survey report on that, and that no longer is an issue. Can you just tell me, for my information purposes, when was the survey conducted?
The first survey was done before the application was submitted, so that was, I think that was May 2020, and then the latest survey was done in May this year. Over certain specified periods as required by the highways officers. We had to be not within a couple of days of bank holidays, school holidays. They wanted it during the day, whereas the standard in residential areas is to do it during the night, so that's when most residents are at home. Our first surveys concentrated more on that because that's sort of standard approach, but highways officers wanted us to look more during the day because of the shopping centre usage. So we've covered probably one set in the first set of surveys, and then the more specific highways requirements in the ones that were done in May this year.
Okay. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So, yeah, thank you. So you've covered off the parking spaces issue and highways feedback on that. I'm just interested in terms of other access vehicles, so such as waste collection and so on. Is the intention to use the main access egress route for the car park for that? And if so, can that be drive-through for larger vehicles?
Yes,
or
so
it's going to be reversing off the highway? That's
part of the reason for the single in and out arrangement. That's all been tracked for a refuse vehicle and emergency vehicles, and there's a pull-in area near the front door to allow, hopefully, for vehicles still to be able to pass. But that has all been tracked for a large refuse vehicle.
Sorry, just come out of my so the drop-off area is the area for the collection. That's the only part that you haven't allowed for pass-through, is it? You've allowed for pass-through of heavy HGVs or refuse vehicles through the car park, but just not past the entrance point, is what you're saying? If a car had to pass a refuse vehicle?
I can't remember off the top of my head whether that was the case, but I know there's a pull-in area there.
I think if you just wait a minute, we're going to...
Okay.
I think we're going to put the picture up, just so as you can get a little bit more. Okay.
I suppose that plan shows that if the room where the three disabled parking spaces are in a row, the rooms immediately to the right of there is the buggy store and the bin store, and the pull-in area is the area, I suppose, it's not north, but on that plan, sort of directly north, in front of those disabled spaces. So that's where the sort of pull-in area is.
Okay.
Right. Sorry. Just to come back, just to clarify, let me ahead there. So you've done the tracked analysis that says your waste vehicles can track round and straight out. It's just a question about whether a vehicle can pass while they're in situ. So
it might be an officer question,
yeah.
not a presentation question. Just hold that one, it's a good one, so we need to have that. Okay, anybody else at all? No, thank you very much for the presentation. If you just turn the mic off for me, that would be good. Before we go. My apologies, members. My brief wasn't the same as the sheet I've got in front of me. We also have Jodie Ashton, who's a parish clerk, I believe, who's also going to address you before we move on. Jodie, do you mind if I ask, are you actually a clerk or a councillor? You are a clerk, okay, thank you. Just so I know. Okay, again, the same thing applies, and you have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee. I'm representing Hampton Parish Council as their clerk. So the Parish Council's primary objection to this application is based solely upon the number of car parking spaces provided. Hampton is a relatively new development area and was built under previous planning regulations that restricted the amount of parking to those living and working in the area, and coupled with narrow roads and wider paths, Hampton is a unique area and one where a lot of its problems are caused by the lack of unavailable parking, or the lack of available parking, I should say. The on-street parking survey dated May 2022 demonstrated a maximum parking stress of 59% on Silver Hill and 46% of the wider surveyed area. Any development without the correct number of allocated parking will push parking onto other roads within the vicinity, and alongside the recent notice of a possible introduction of yellow lines on one or both sides of Silver Hill between the junctions of Stanton Square and Lakeview Way, this would surely increase the parking stress in all areas. The Parish Council would support this application if the developers agreed to the Highways Agency's initial 70% figure of 56 parking spaces to be made available. This would reduce the overall need for on-street parking and would help to mitigate any parking problems caused by this development. Chair.
Okay, it was very, very short and very, very sweet, but thank you very much. Members, do you have questions at all, please? Yes, Councillor Sanford.
Yeah, you obviously heard my question to the previous speaker, and she appeared to be saying that quite a high proportion, because of the age of the people that are likely to be moving into this development, that quite a significant number of them probably aren't going to need cars because, you know, there's facilities very near to them, shops and that sort of thing. So, given if that's the case, why do you think that there's a need for a significant increase in the amount of parking?
Thank you, Councillor. In that instance, I know that the age that for applications have been raised from 55 to 60, but 60 is still of working age. I would ask then, if that is the case, why not increase the age to 70? You know, beyond the retirement age, and that would eliminate any need for people to need a car for work purposes.
Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. We'll then go to questions for officers. Councillor Sharp, we'll start with you, because you had a highways one, and then we'll come round to anybody else.
Thank you, Chair. Do you pick it up, or do you want me to repeat it?
I'm happy to answer your question, Councillor Sharp. In the transport statement, in the appendices section, there's an auto-track plan that demonstrates a refuse vehicle can enter the site and leave in forward gear.
Okay, does that answer your question? Yes, any other questions at all for officers at all? Looks like you're going to get away with it. Oh, Councillor Sharp.
Apologies if I missed it somewhere else in the report, but in the consultations there is a comment under the highway section that says, whilst not presented the way they would usually expect, this is in terms of the age restriction on occupants and the parking. Do you know what that refers to, or what your comment, the background to that comment is in terms of not presented the way you would expect? Is it just a layout of the report that doesn't meet a standard structure, or is there anything further behind it?
In the parking survey evidence, there were a number of comparable sites that were used to demonstrate the parking provision. The applicant had demonstrated that their site had sort of provided 0.56 parking spaces per room, but I think there were some local sites that were providing sort of 0.7 spaces per room, but that was the worst case scenario. So based on that worst case scenario, the Highway Authority would have preferred that parking space provision to meet the 0.7 spaces per room. but the applicant had provided robust parking survey evidence to demonstrate that there was on-street parking provision to cater for that shortfall in provision, which that provision would equate to about 11 parking spaces. So I think that's where that comment has come from.
So I was just going to supplement that and say that actually the comment specifically referred to was about the format of the report itself and the sequence the information was presented, so it was much more of a sort of a presentational issue rather than a content issue, if that makes sense.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Rush.
Just one for highways. In the report you said that a similar development in Stanground. Is that Kingfisher Court? So I can just get my head around the size and the spaces.
You're testing my memory here, Councillor Rush, but I believe that may have been one of the developments that was used.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, Chair, one
sorry.
into my head.
Good.
So the only thing I don't think we've covered off is the effective change of use. So I just wondered if we could just summarise officers' view in terms of reallocating this piece of land from the normal development allocation for the back of Serpentine Green to now in housing, because what I'm particularly interested in, what does it, if we refuse the application and further development of that land as currently planned happened, what would it mean for the last section of land, i.e. half the site that you've identified? Does that then become constrained to the point where it can't be developed? So,
thank you, Councillor Sharp. So we looked at the local centre allocation from a number of points of view in terms of both what would be left in terms of residual land from the allocation for the local centre, but also the compatibility of the use proposed within the application and this location. So take that two ways. I'm going to reverse that slightly. So first and foremost, this type of use in a local centre we felt was compatible because of the population demographic, the profile of residents and their desire to be located in an area where they have access, readily available access to services and facilities beyond the four walls of the development itself, where it is an important part of that tenure. And in terms of the residual land left for the local centre, we looked at that and also looked at things like retail trends, the demand for physical retail presence. And since the allocation, which obviously stretches back some time now, it's evident that with COVID, the acceleration away from physical presence and the need for as much floor space in terms of those sort of retail uses and the local centre uses that were originally envisaged, the floor space requirement is lower than originally anticipated. So we were comfortable that with what is still a substantial amount of land to come forward for local centre uses, it didn't prejudice that ability to come forward. And if you look at the parcel of land as it is itself, it's contained by the residential development on one side and the footpath that takes you up to Serpentine Green on the other side. So seeing that come forward as a consolidated proposal made sense and still leaves a substantial parcel of land that can come forward in a coordinated way for a local centre use on the other side of the footpath on the northern side of Silver Hill still, and in a meaningful sense. So we were pretty comfortable in that sense.
Okay, Councillor Rush.
In the plan for this piece of land, was there a time limit on when the what should have been built on there that was in the plan?
So the allocation, no. I mean, the allocation set a broad vision for the site. The outline for Hampton obviously is time limited, but with a long stop that isn't of a particular sort of relevance to the local centre coming forward. Obviously, the land has sat fallow now for a period of time, so seeing something coming forward that is compatible with that is obviously something that I think as officers we would encourage.
And I don't see any more hands. Oh, sorry, yeah. Councillor Sandford, sorry, your camouflage behind your shirt.
Thank you. I'll wear a different shirt next time. I was just wondering, there's not much reference in the report for what landscaping is proposed. I think it almost says, well, there's not much on the site at the moment, so any landscaping would be an improvement. But I'm conscious that there's a quote in the report from paragraph 131 of the MPPF, which talks about taking opportunities for improved biodiversity and particular for tree planting. And so I'm just concerned that this is, you've basically got a site which is like much like a blank sheet of paper. So are we going to be putting conditions on to ensure that there is a high quality landscaping?
Could you just skip forward in the presentation for a second? So the layout plan, if you skip forward a couple of slides, there's a layout plan. Yeah, again. That one, perfect. Yes, so as you can hopefully see from this image, could you make that full screen, Karen? Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So there are a number of areas of landscaping opportunities included within the proposal. The private amenity areas to the north of to the north on that plan anyway, but there are perimeter landscaping areas shown within the master plan for the site, as you can see on that image. Some of those break up the mass near the car park, for example. Some of that reinforces the perimeter both along Silver Hill and along the footpath areas. And there are conditions in the recommendation that look to secure the final details of the landscape proposal as well. So I think we've covered it in that sense, but unless you had any sort of further follow-up questions on that.
Okay. Fine. Anybody else? No? All done? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, officers. Right, we're going to move then to debate. Who would like to start that? Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. As I understand from all the presentations and from the report, the only live and real issue before the committee is the highway / parking. The applicants have demonstrated that they've provided all the necessary survey reports as per the officers' expectations. Therefore, considering that the only issue has been addressed appropriately according to their expectations, I don't see any reason that we should go against officers' recommendation. So I'm happy to support the officers' recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Anybody else want to join in? Councillor Sanford.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think I broadly support what Councillor Iqbal was saying. I was looking at policy LP 13 on transport, and it says that new development should ensure that appropriate provision is made for the transport needs that it will create, including reducing the need to travel. I think this, as I see it, is a highly sustainable development, which is close to the facilities that the people that are moving into these properties are going to require. It's close to Serpentine Green for shopping and other things. I think that there was a point of contention on parking, but I think the explanation that we've heard, the sort of age of the people that will be moving into these properties are, obviously you can never be 100% certain, but the probability is that a significant proportion of them aren't going to need cars because they'll already have facilities close to them. So I would be quite happy to support this subject to the conditions that are being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Councillor Hiller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I broadly agree with both of the previous commentators. I would suggest that Councillor Sanford looks at the conditioning of the recommendation and condition 13 and condition 14, which I think, as they normally do, adequately cover the landscaping of any new development, specifically obviously this development, so that might be useful information. I don't have any real issues with this at all, Chair. Actually, the only reason it's here before the committee is it's contrary to local plan. I get that. It's local centre land which has been reallocated The consultation appears extensive, the objections appear minimal. Our highways service is reasonably happy with the response that they've got from the applicant. They are a proper firm, a proper provider of this type of accommodation. I've sort of thought with interest about this 60 years. I'm over 60. I've got a car. I expect to have a car for quite some time, electric or otherwise. And I don't think the age is particularly relevant, frankly. But you're spitting distance away from one of the largest Tesco's in the UK, so with associated retail outlets. I was very interested to see, to listen to our planning officer talking about the need for footfall in retail post-COVID, and I absolutely agree with that. I think the propensity perhaps of people visiting shops other than for things that you can't buy online. I mean, what can't you buy online nowadays? I think has perhaps negated to a degree the initial proposed use of this land as a local centre. So I would be supporting this application, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. Councillor Hussain?
Yeah, similar to previous comments from colleagues. The parking thing was an issue, but I think it's been well addressed. Elizabeth Bloomfield from the agent gave a good profile of what the residents would be like, so I don't see that as a concern for me anymore. I think the development's really well thought out. I think they've given good consideration to the street scene, and staggered it at the start, with adjoining buildings, and so yeah, I'm for this development.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Anybody else? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, reading the report, I think all the issues that have been raised have been dealt with by all the officers. The parking that is the lay-by parking is going to be moved across the other side of the road. The land is laid barren for many, many years, and I think it's a really good use of that land, so I will be really supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Rush. Councillor Sharp, did you say yes? You wanted to? Yes, Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, very briefly. Yes, just to follow on from previous speakers, my summation is fairly simple. I think we've answered the questions around the principles of development, which was the initial concern, and then secondary in terms of parking, and I can see nothing from the answers and the detail in the report that says we're contravening any local plans or guidance. So as a resident of Hampton, I do understand the concerns around parking, clearly. However, I can see nothing that can really cause us to refuse this planning application on that basis, because all the questions and concerns have been answered. So I will be supporting the application.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Anybody else? Are we all done? Looks like we're all done. Okay, thank you. Bearing that in mind, then, do I have a proposer for a proposal? I have Councillor Iqbal for your proposal, please.
I'm happy to propose that we support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. The seconder? Councillor Rush, are you going to second?
Happy to propose that I recommend the officer's approval and to go along with all the conditions that's been highlighted.
Okay, thank you. So, committee, we have a proposal which has been seconded, so we'll go to the vote. So, all those in favour? It looks like it's unanimous, but I'll go against just to make sure, and obviously no abstentions. Councillor, did you want? Oh, I thought you'd be under it, sorry. So it's unanimous, so the application is approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Just wait a minute while we change offices, please, for the next item. Go down, yeah. Councillor, sit down. Okay, committee will move on then to the next item, 5.2, which relates to 4 Muswell Road, West Town in Peterborough, and will be presented by Phil Moore. When you're ready, please.
Right,
That's it, you're in.
thank you. Thank you, Chairman. My name's Phil Moore, Development Management Team Leader. And this application that I'm about to present to you now is a householder planning application for a first floor rear extension to a dwelling. And it's been referred to committee by Councillor Rang Zeb. In terms of the public consultation, we've received a petition with 7 signatures from residents of the retirement complex to the rear. They've raised concerns that it would cause disruption to the area and their retirement living scheme. Next slide, please. I think you've skipped one. Next one on from that. There's one missing.
Which one are you talking to?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll continue. So the site is a semi-detached dwelling at Muswell Road, West Town in the city, and the red line shows the property boundary. The blue outline shows the neighbouring property, which is in the same ownership. This area is a sort of fairly low density area with mostly semi-detached dwellings in regular sized plots. To the immediate east there's a retirement complex. Next slide, please. Now this view is a satellite view. You can see the retirement complex on the right hand side of the picture. The plot itself is shown with the kind of red pear shape, inverted pear shape. You can see from this satellite view that the house has already been extended to the north. It has a 2-storey side extension, and to the east it already has a single-storey rear extension. Next slide, please. So this is the existing block plan, showing the relationship with the neighbouring properties. The plot obviously outlined in red, the next door neighbour property to the left of the picture in the same ownership, outlined in blue. And you can see that from this that the house has been extended to the rear and the side already. Next slide, please, Karen. Back one. Yep. So this is the proposed block plan. The hatched area shows the area to be extended. First floor. Next slide, please. Existing plans and elevations. So this, as you can see again from this one, the house has been extended already to the rear, single storey, and to the side, 2-storey. Next slide, please. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on this one. This is the proposed plans and elevations. Starting from the top left corner, ground floor, no change in the ground floor, that would stay as is. The central plan, the top centre plan on this slide shows the first floor, and it's shown as consisting of a disabled bedroom, disabled bathroom or washroom, and a second WC and a corridor area. That's the proposed extension. The top right picture shows the rear elevation. It's a hip roof structure. It covers roughly 2/3 of the extent of the rear elevation. The bottom left picture is the north side elevation, and as you can see on that one, there would be a window which would be obscure glazed. The central bottom image is the street elevation. There wouldn't be any change from the street. It wouldn't really be visible from the street. And the bottom right, that's looking from the south, and you can see the extent of the extension on that one. Next slide, please. So it just as by way of background information, there is an extant permission on this site for an identical proposal to what's in front of you today. However, that proposal also included a series of extensions on the neighbouring property number 6, including a 2-storey rear extension. That's an extant permission. There was a condition attached to that requiring that both of those extensions should be built together, as it was considered that if number 4's extension was built on its own, it would have no bearing impact on number 6. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, some photographs. This is taken from the garden of number 4. On the left hand side you've got the existing single storey extension. The proposal will be directly above that. Next slide, please. Taken from a slightly different angle, showing the whole of the rear of number 4. The extension would extend roughly from the patio doors to the right hand side of the building there. Next slide, please. That's taken from a different angle, showing the relationship to the neighbouring property. Again, the extension will be roughly above the patio doors and the window next to it. Next slide, please. And this is a bit taken from a bit further afield, which again you can see the relationship between the host dwelling and the neighbouring property. Next slide, please. Just finally, some aerial images taken from Google, which I think illustrate better than any of those other photographs the relationship between number 4 and number 6. So as you can see where the arrow is pointing there, that's the existing single-storey rear extension. The proposal would be above that, adding an additional floor to probably 2/3 of that existing extension. Next slide, please. And this is a similar aerial photograph taken from a different angle, again illustrating the relationship. So in terms of our evaluation, the key issues are really two things really: the impact on the character and appearance of the area and impact on neighbours' amenities. So in terms of the appearance of the area, the extension is considered to be acceptable. It's appropriate in terms of size, design, materials, not dissimilar to other extensions nearby. In terms of amenity, this is slightly more difficult. The relationship between number 2 to the south and the retirement homes to the east is deemed to be acceptable. There's good separation distances, no overlooking or overbearing impact. However, on balance, this is considered to have an overbearing impact on number 6, which is not outweighed, or there hasn't been any evidence presented for any kind of overriding disabled need that would outweigh the harm. However, if members were minded to approve, officers would recommend a number of conditions. These would include time limit, approved plans, matching materials and obscure glazing. However, just to conclude, on balance it is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Phil. Okay, we've got 3 people ready to speak. Firstly, I'll call Councillor Ranj Zeb and Nawaz, please. Right, to come to... he's been told, hasn't he? No. Okay.
Karen, can you make the images full size because they're quite small on screen?
Good afternoon, Councillor, and welcome to your first Planning Committee. You'll have 10 minutes when you're ready to address committee, so when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. It is my first meeting at the Planning Committee, and Councillor Rangzeb was representing my constituent who lives within...
Sorry, yeah, could you please pull the mic closer or move closer, thank you.
Yeah, I'm here to represent one of my constituents who lives within my ward. I am here in support of this application. I support this because of 2 reasons. Firstly, considering the plot and the layout of the number 4 and number 6 Muswell Road. And secondly, Mr. Razak, the applicant, is ill health, and the applicant is old, disabled and suffering from multiple illnesses. In my opinion, the proposed application is not any different to the area or its characteristics, as the officers has agreed to that as well, and it will not have an overbearing impact on number 6 Muswell Road, because as you might have seen on there as well, on the picture displayed, the properties 4 and 6 are not exactly parallel to one another. They are on a curved, they are on an angle, and as the extension goes out towards the garden, the space is created more and more, and there's not so much of an overbearing impact. For that reason, I think that the extension wouldn't have any overbearing impact on number 6. Secondly, I must admit my bias when it comes to supporting the disabled and those who face the illness. I would often look at it as if I was in such situation, and what will be my reaction in expectation from people around me and the wider society. I sincerely pray and that none of us are in such situation, or we don't face such illnesses as we get old. While I was talking to Mr. Razak, the applicant, He said to me that he is old. The day by day, his mobility is getting reduced, and he's got other illnesses. Is that he's got a numb bladder, so at times he can't control when he needs to go to relieve himself. He said to me, he just can't go further away to relieve himself, or he may end up wetting himself while going to the toilet. Members, this is a really difficult situation for someone who wants to pray 5 times a day, and he wants to stay clean most of the times so that he can pray. As you might well be aware that most of the devout Muslims, we have to pray 5 times a day. And before we stand in front of the Lord, we need to be in a state of cleanliness. So someone of his age who has prayed whole of his life, and if he faces such situation, I think he deserves some relief. Therefore, in summary, as I have highlighted the layout of number 4 and 6 Moswell Road and the ill health of Mr. Razak, I will urge you to be kind and considerate when giving your decision, so that the applicant can live his life with respect and dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, any questions, please? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Councillor. You said that the applicant has got reduced mobility and it's getting worse every day. Do you know if there's an internal lift up to the first floor?
Sorry, I misheard you.
Can you repeat it, Brian?
Sorry. You said the applicant is getting, he's got reduced mobility and it's getting worse every day. Could you tell me if there is an internal lift that the disabled person will be able to use to get up to the first floor?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, I have actually spoken to the applicant, and my personal advice to him was that why don't you go and build something on the ground floor, because you're getting older. But his response to me was that he's got a lift, he spent a lot of money on that. That's why he wants to make use of that. Plus, he's fearful, he's old. And if something happened to me while I'm sleeping downstairs, I wouldn't be able to call somebody for help. So for that reason, that is the reason that I want to build an extension. I'm not asking for any grants or anything, but I just want to spend my hard-earned savings and just to facilitate myself. Thank you.
I say yes. Yeah. You having trouble?
No, got it. Thank you, Councillor. I was thinking the same when you said about, I would have thought because the applicant was disabled, he would be better on the ground floor than he would the first floor. Thank you.
You got a lift. That's answered that question. Anybody else? No. Councillor, sorry, making sure I'm on. Obviously, you've come to represent one of your constituents. When we listened or when we read the report, there was no actual real evidence of a problem, considering the disablements you mentioned. So why was that not forthcoming in the report as to why? You've said it, I appreciate that, but that should be in the report. An officer can't make a recommendation when there's no proof, there's no evidence. So why was that not in the report, would you think?
Thank you. I'm not so sure why this wasn't recognized. As I understand, one of the applications that was submitted as a joint application. On that occasion, according to my fellow councillor, Councillor Gul, one of the officers visited the property, and it's evident that the man is on crutches. And I know that because I live not far from where this gentleman lives. And he used to be walking mobile, and lately for some time he's been on crutches, and I haven't seen him walking down the road. And I know well, this is my personal knowledge, and if it had been required, I think it's very easy for him to provide the evidence regarding the disability. And because he's had a cancer treatment on his bladder, and that's why his bladder is numb, and at times he can't control it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Iqbal?
Thank you for your presentation, Councillor Aurangzeb. Where is the applicant now?
I did inform the applicant that there is a meeting today. I'm not so sure why didn't he turn up. He did actually call me last night, and kind of he calls me every second, third day as well, what is the progress or what is happening, but no, I can't answer that because I don't know what his whereabouts.
I did see someone in a wheelchair sitting outside. I assume that was the applicant. I mean, if he's out of the crowd, ask him to come in.
Certainly. I mean,
that's the reason I asked him the question.
That being the case, I'm just going to adjourn for 5 minutes while we sort that out, if you please bear with us. Can somebody go and check and see if we can get the lift? You're going to go here? That's a nice idea. Okay, we are going to resume, and welcome, sir, and thank you for joining us. I'm glad we've found you. Councillor Iqbal, did you have any more questions, or is that it?
I just thought that if his physical presence was here, then obviously we won't have to ask those questions, because we probably see him ourselves. That's the reason I asked whether he was around. He could be in the committee.
Yes, well, he's down to speak, so hopefully he'll be able to get your chance. So, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Okay. So, Mr. Rezaj, is that how I pronounce it? Would you like to take one of those mics rather than come over for him? Oh, you got one, yeah? Okay. Welcome to committee. I'm sorry we had a bit of a delay there. We didn't realise you were there.
Yeah, no,
you have 5 minutes when you're ready to address committee.
Yeah, hi, I'm the son of Mohammed Razak. We just want to let you guys know that my father not being given permission to make this disabled wet room and living room is having a massive impact on my father and us who's actually looking after him. My father has a spinal cord injury. He has massive incontinence problems. His bowel and bladder leaks almost every night. So therefore, I live next door. I then have to wake up and then wash my father, take him downstairs to the toilet, and just get him back and ready again. And I have a severely disabled child, which doesn't sleep a lot. So that's having a massive impact on my life as well. So we were just asking, please, to give us permission so we can make the room and obviously make my father's life bit more livable or bearable, and obviously make our life easier as well, please.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, please, from anybody on the committee? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming to the meeting. I'll ask you the question that I asked the councillor. Could you tell me if there's a lift inside the house?
Yes, there is, yeah.
There is? All right, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank Thank you for coming. Just a question, was any evidence provided to the case officer regarding your dad's multiple illnesses?
No, we weren't asked to provide anything.
Okay. Short and sweet. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move then straight to questions for officers, which I think this is one that needs to be asked straight away. Who's going to ask that question, or should I ask it? Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. On page 51, under the heading of site and surroundings, they said comprising of mostly semi-detached dwellings with defined gaps between the dwellings. What is the defined gap between the properties? Do you know, or is that a too specific question?
So I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly what the gap is in terms of the measurement. I would imagine it would be between 2.5 and 3 metres.
1 metre would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so that you can see from that slide the relationship between the two dwellings there. The sort of rectangle at the side of number 6 there is actually a driveway rather than the building itself. So that is the existing gap that exists between those two dwellings at the moment in terms of wall to wall, which I would say is probably between 2.5 and 3 metres. That's a guess without properly measuring it, but that's an estimate.
I've got a few questions, Chair, is that all right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Councillor Ringsave in his presentation said something about the properties not being in parallel, and then if you just go inwards, goes in a sort of a curve way. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. Most of the properties on that street they follow a regular building line in a straight line. In this, the relationship between number 4 and number 6 is, as you say, slightly offset. So yeah, that's a correct observation.
So considering that, then we could probably obviously use the word balance. We could accept to a certain extent that it may not have a overwhelming bearing impact because it's in a curve and it's going out. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would say it's a matter of judgment whether or not this creates an overbearing impact. We've said clearly in the report, on balance, we consider that it does tip into that unacceptable impact. But, as I said, it's a matter of judgment. There's nothing set in stone in terms of separation distances or when does an impact become unacceptable. It's down to a matter of judgment at the end of the day. And as I said in the presentation, it is on balance. So it's up to the committee to come to their own view as to does the committee think it's unacceptably overbearing or not.
On page 51 it says the proposed extension would add a disabled wet room, and then on page 54 under the personal circumstances it says the bathroom would also be provided which would not be specifically for the disabled resident. My understanding is the bathroom is for a disabled resident, isn't it?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the end of
it. If you look at page 54,
yeah,
it says it would not be specifically for the disabled resident, but in the proposal is saying that it would add a disabled wet room, so it is for a disabled person, the bathroom. Am I correct?
So on the plans that I've got in front of me, the submitted proposed floor plans, it's showing disabled bedroom, a disabled wet room, and then in addition to that it's got what's described as a WC, which is served by a separate corridor. So that's the bit that...
So the answer is yes.
We're assuming that isn't specifically for the disabled resident.
But it is.
Okay.
Okay. Final question, Chair, through you. Final question. Initial consultation was 26, total number of responses was 1, and there's only 1 objection. Am I correct to understand that 1 objection was the way of petition that was presented by, I think it was the resident, and is that what, am I correct to understand?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it was residents from the retirement complex behind, and they were, the words of in the petition were they were concerned it would cause disruption to the area and their retirement complex. That's what it said.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Chair.
Right, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go to one of the slides where it shows the back of the house from the aerial view, if possible. It's probably the other one. That one there. So looking at that, I'm guessing the numbers here, but it seems like number 10 and number 16, especially number 16, have a similar extension to the one that's proposed. They're more sort of in line, they're on a bend, but they're more sort of in line, whereas these 2 properties are, as Councillor Amjad said, sort of moving away from each other at the rear, so expanding. Those seem to be accepted, but would you not say that this one would be less of an impact on the neighbouring properties than those 2?
I can't give a definitive answer on that, I'm afraid, Councillor, because I'm not familiar with the one that you've pointed out, the exact details of it. It looks to be a similar relationship in terms of the angles of the properties.
Okay. Can I just remind you, it's for you to make the decision, it's not for you to change the officer's view. Yeah, it's your judgment you're going to call. So please remember, your question is to get facts, not to push the officer to change how he feels or give you the answer. I know where you're going. Councillor Sanford.
Yes, thank you. As I understand it, there's only 1 grounds for refusal, which is the impact it's going to have on the occupier of number 6. But did you actually receive any comments from the occupier of number 6? Did that person actually say that they believe that the development would have an overbearing impact on them?
No, we had no objections from anybody except from the retirement properties to the rear. Number 6, as I understand it, is in the same ownership as number 4.
No, I'm sorry, I'll do it for you. The gentleman who's spoken earlier is in the house next door. Yeah? Is that clear?
Okay, I see, yes, yeah. Okay.
Okay, I think we've cleared that one. I've got Councillor Sanford after you. Councillor Sharp then.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Zane has covered off my first question, which was relating to potential overbearing on properties. I think it's, as you say, 10 and 16. Because in relation to that, what I was interested in is your reasonable refusal of view that you could be setting a precedent in that street, hence that was going to be the reason for my question. So perhaps you could still answer that first piece, and then I have got a follow-up.
I think in terms of precedent, we have to be very wary of this term precedent in planning. Each case has to be judged on its own merits. I can't comment on the other extension that's further down the road because I don't know the individual circumstances of that one. I don't know the dimensions or the exact relationship, but so yeah, each case on its own merits.
And sorry, Chair.
Yes, carry on.
Thank you. So the overbearing nature is it's clear in the report, is only relating to number 6. There is already an existing planning application, you stated, for both properties that have to be done concurrently. So if for instance, we were minded to grant this planning application to the officer's view, that's an if clearly, what happens to that existing planning application in condition on number 6? Does that then become null and void, or does the current owner or future owner still have the ability to develop within the time period that was set on that original condition?
So just to clarify then, there is this extant permission for what is proposed as part of this application, together with a 2-storey and single-storey extensions on number 6. That's still extant. That could be carried out any time up to the 3-year limit, and I think there's another 2 years or so left on that. Or if you were to grant approval for this today, either of those planning permissions could be implemented.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Rush.
Under personal circumstances, it says, personal circumstances usually do not form part of the planning assessment criteria unless there is a valid and justable reason presented. Is there I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask this question, is there a justified reason for the extension?
Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
So there's 2 ways you can look at this. One, you could take the view that there is no overbearing impact on the neighbouring property, in which case the need question doesn't need to be addressed. It's only if you're balancing need against what would normally be an unacceptable impact, where you might take the view that the need outweighs the harm from overbearing impact. So if there was evidence presented that there was a need that was of such a degree that it outweighed the negative impact, then you could take the view that that need is enough to sway the balance and approve. But that's only in the case where you accepted that there was an overbearing impact in the first place. If you took the view there wasn't an overbearing impact, there would the need question doesn't exist.
Anybody else got a question at all? No, then I'm going to move on to the debate side now. So who would like to start that? Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. So, as officers were just saying about need and overbearing the impact, looking at the plan, firstly, I don't see there being an overbearing impact on the neighbouring property. Secondly, with the neighbour being the son and them wanting or asking for this development as well, the street showing similar developments being done in the past. Looking at the distance to the properties at the rear, although you said officers said there was some objection from there, I think the properties are far away, or the distance is substantial enough to not have an impact. There's a tree line there. The window that would probably be overlooking in that direction is a bathroom, which I'm guessing would be obscured. So, and there's, looking at the gentleman that's been wheeled in, I'm guessing there is a genuine need there. So I'm minded to go against officer's recommendation on this one and vote for approval.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Sanford.
Yeah, I think I'm broadly supportive of what Councillor Hussain was saying. I think from what we've heard from the applicant, I think there is a need for this. I think it's unfortunate that information didn't find its way into the report. I think, obviously it's an arguable point whether the possibility of overlooking is overbearing. I think that, given that the person who's occupying that property currently doesn't actually object to it, and he's actually got a planning permission for an extension himself. I suppose there's a possibility that he may move out of the property and someone else who may move in, and they might find it overbearing. But I think also, you can see on the aerial photograph that there is a separation between the two properties. There is a difference in their sort of angle. So, I don't normally, in the times I've been on planning committee, I'd normally be reluctant to vote in favour of granting planning permission when officers are recommending refusal. But I think, as I see it in this particular case, I think the grounds for refusal are rather flimsy, so I would support approving it.
Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Unfortunately, on this occasion, I am minded to go against the officer's recommendation, merely for a few reasons. One is, I think Councillor Rangzabe gave a very excellent address to the committee. I think the sticking point from his address was that the properties are not parallel and there's a curve in the property, and if you go back, they widen up. I think that was a very important point raised by him, which I think made me, to a certain extent, change my mind to go against the officer's recommendation. I mean, looking at the report, the only sticky point is whether it has an overbearing impact on number 6. I mean, if you look at LP 16, you don't have any, officers don't have an issue with that. It's within the character. There's no overwhelming, overlooking impact on the property. Yes, we have objections, but you've rightly addressed the objections in your report that they are not commercial nature. But if it was a commercial thing, then yes, it would be acceptable. This is a domestic use, so their views, you can't attach any weight to them. So the only issue, as rightly said by my fellow councillors, is the distance between the boundary of number 6 and number 4. I personally believe, and as the officer said, that this is a subjective sort of view, it's a judgment that we as a committee have to make. And on balance, I think that's the word the officer used, on balance, I believe that it would not have an unbearable impact on number 6. So that's one issue that I'd like to address. However, as far as the need is concerned, I'm sure the officers did visit the property on numerous occasions. They probably did have a sight of the lift, which is part of, which was installed in the staircase. There is a general need. The applicant has come to the committee to address. The son did speak on his behalf and has told us that he has multiple illness, and from his wheelchair it's clearly evident that mobility is an issue. So firstly, if the committee is not minded to accept that the overweighing is sort of issue, I would say that balancing the need with the overbearing will outweigh it, considering his present circumstances. On that basis, I will recommend the committee to go against the officer's recommendation and grant an application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Hiller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm broadly in agreement with most of what has been said, but I am steering away from the need criteria. In this instance, I thought our planning officer gave an excellent response to the question as to whether we should consider the need aspect of this application, and on his recommendation as to whether we actually agree with the reason for refusal or not takes primacy in my opinion. A couple of people have mentioned, and certainly Councillor Rangzabe with his address mentioned the slight arc on the road, and that was something I was very conscious of and had a good look at. The potential for ameliorating that impact should it be approved, and this is the value, as you've said on many occasions, Chair, this is the value of a site visit, and in my opinion the positioning of those houses, the rear gardens are on a splay, if you will, and I think this has been mentioned several times, and that, in my opinion, mitigates the impact of this potential extension. But let's not forget that it already has permission. There is an extent permission for both number 6 and number 4 to have similar extensions to the rear. What we're talking about now is number 4 and whether the impact for number 6 is going to affect dramatically the amenity of number 4. I don't think it is, frankly. The main habitable rooms we saw on the site visit, the main habitable rooms of number 4 were not impacted upon at all. I think there was a stairwell to the left-hand side. I think there was a kitchen to the right-hand side. The new windows that will be created at first floor level at number 6 were obscure glazed. Our officer gave us a good explanation of that. The only objections, as I understand it, from listening to people, were from the property down here, which were the residents of a communal property. They were primarily objecting to the disruption that would create. Now, it would be doubly bad if both of those houses were extended at the same time, which was the extent permission that's already there. So, it would be half the impact of what is already been permitted. So, on the basis of all of that, Chair, I would be, and I don't think it's unfortunate, I would be motioning that we ought to go against the officer's recommendation on this occasion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Okay, yeah. No, nobody else. I think it's all been covered. I'm not going to go over it all again, really, apart from probably just to send out that reminder that if officers need evidence, they need evidence, and it's very difficult and it's not fair, because effectively, if that evidence has been forthcoming, we might not even be sitting there having to make this decision. And that's why I think it's on balance, is because the evidence wasn't there. We've now got the evidence, luckily. Site visits, I always push site visits anyway, because yes, luckily we have Google Maps now, etc., so we can see some of the idea and some of the layouts. But to be there and actually see that, you would have seen, as Councillor Hill said, that you can appreciate the display is there. So I would urge you, if you can, to visit them. Other than that, I think you're quite right. I think it is an unbalanced decision, and I think on balance, I would support actually going against officers' recommendation in this, based on the evidence we've now got, and allow this to go ahead. Right, okay, Councillor Iqbal, then you have a proposal.
Yes, sir. I have a proposal that we go against the officer's recommendation, and what I'm going to say is that it won't have an overbearing impact on number 6, and it's not contrary to policy LP 17, and whatever conditions the officers want to attach to it, they're happy to do that.
Okay, fine. Clear with that one?
Can we just run through the proposed conditions? I think, Phil, you had some suggested conditions. Would you want to suggest these to Councillor Iqbal as to whether those were the conditions that he had in mind?
Yeah, so Councillor Iqbal, the suggested conditions were the standard time limit condition that development should be commenced within 3 years, the standard approved plans condition that ties the permission to the submitted plans, materials to match, and finally that the side windows should be obscure glazed. They're all standard conditions.
I'm happy with that. Absolutely fine.
Good. So we've got a proposal. Seconder, Councillor Hussain? Okay, committee, yep. So we've got a proposal and we've got it seconded, so we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? That's another unanimous decision. So there's obviously no against or abstentions, so the application is approved in this case. Thank you. So good luck in the future. Okay, members, we'll move on to item 6 then, which is the Appeals Quarterly Report. And when you're ready, will be presented by Sylvia.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chairman. Every quarter we bring to you a report that summarises the appeals that we received in the previous 3 months, and that's the basis of the report that's in front of you. So over the last quarter we've had 8 appeals, and of those 2 of those were allowed and 6 were refused. Of those 6, 2 were a split decision, as in part of the appeal was allowed but part was refused, with the overall decision being a refusal. And as you can see from the table in the report, that means that the percentage allowed based on the number of appeals was 25%, and it brings a running total over the last couple of years of 26%. Now that's a pretty good appeal rate. That means that the local authority is winning 75% of the appeals that we fight, and so I think that's something to be pleased about. We also keep a running total of the number of appeals against all applications that we determine, and we do that because that's one of the government statistics, and they monitor those across the country. And again, because of this good appeal rate, we are under the threshold. That means that we're making good decisions that are not exceeding the ones that are being allowed on appeal. So I'd say a lot of reassurance to you there that the decisions your officers and yourselves are making at committee are meeting government targets. We also give you a breakdown of the appeals and any interesting cases that we've had, any sort of interesting decisions that have been reached by the Planning Inspectorate. So there isn't too much by way of learning over the last quarter. I think the only thing that I would mention to you is that one of the appeals related to a decision made by a planning committee. It was the taxi booking office at 35 Westgate, which you remember came to committee, was refused. Then a second application came to committee. The applicant included additional mitigation measures, the use of stewards, a larger waiting area, and that application with that additional information was approved by committee. Then a few months later, the appeal against the first refusal by committee was determined by the Inspectorate, who came to a view that it should be allowed. So that was a permission. And again, very much like the committee decision, it was a temporary permission for a short period of time, 1 to 2 years, to allow the operation of the taxi rank to be monitored. And what this means for the applicant is that they effectively have 2 permissions and they can choose which one to implement. We would hope that they'd implement the second one approved by committee because that had extra measures associated with it, the stewards and such like, but it is available to them to choose which one to implement. Okay, so are there any questions from the report? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. If you could pass on, obviously, our thanks on behalf of the committee for your...
Yep, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, for your work and your officers' work. I know you're under pressure as well with time for officers, etc. So I think they're doing a marvellous job. And hopefully you've read that report and you can see how planning inspectors' brains work as well. So it's something to take away. Other than that, thank you very much. That's your first one over. I appreciate all the questions. Excellent questions and debate today. Do appreciate that. And thank you to all officers, etc. and advisors who are here today for your time. And I'll see you again in about 4 weeks. Thank you.